name is Jamie Lawson. I'm the planning director for the city of Burlington. Thanks so much for coming. We know everybody has busy schedules, so we appreciate you taking a couple of minutes outside of your day, especially on a Monday, to join us. I'm here with Chad Meadows from Code Right. And Chad has been our consultant who has worked with us, with the city, on our Unified Development Ordinance, which is essentially our zoning ordinance for the entire city. And we've been doing workshops over the last several months to engage the public, to get feedback on our Unified Development Ordinance, things that work within the ordinance, areas that developers or property owners have questions about. So we're here today to get some additional feedback and solicit input from you all on particular areas that Chad's going to go through a short presentation. Not sure on his presentation if at the end he's got a link to our website, but all of our past seminars are also available, so through YouTube that you can download. And city staff is kind of sitting in the back, so if anybody wants to engage us and talk about other projects or particular things after Chad's done with his presentation, we are happy to do that. So let me turn it over to Chad.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yep.
Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Oh, the bathrooms are down the hall.
Yes, bathrooms,
down the hall.
the exit sign, and down the hall to your left, okay? Thank you guys so much for coming. As Jamie mentioned, I'm Chad Meadows, and I'm principal of Code Right. I'll tell you a little bit more about me in a second. But everybody got everything they need? Food, beverage, everything good? Okay. We are scheduled to talk from about 12, 12:30 to about 2. And if we talk that long, that's fantastic. If we don't, or you need to go, feel free to leave. This is very much a discussion, not a talking head presentation. We're here talking to you guys about issues that you're facing, concerns you have, suggestions you have for the city, for us to find ways to make the UDO more effective and do a better job. And so, we ask the question, are we getting it right? So let's jump in. As I mentioned, we really want to hear from you guys today. This is an opportunity. It's part of a series of workshops the city's been doing over the last several months to talk with developers, talk with landowners, talk with applicants, find out what's working, what's not working, what could be improved, how we could do a better job. I will tell you that you are blessed to have the staff and the elected officials that you have. I do a lot of code writing in a lot of places across the state. Burlington is one of the few communities where I've ever worked where there is the level of commitment that the city has to making sure that the development regulations are up to date, current, correct, and operable. That is huge. And you're very, very fortunate to have that in this community. I hope that you think about that and take advantage of it and avail yourselves of the opportunities that creates. So, I'm going to talk about the UDO for a minute or two. Before I do, let me just ask a quick question. How many of you guys are in the development field, whatever that might be? Just a show of hands. 1, 2, 3 of you? Okay. How many of you guys don't even know what the heck a UDO is? Nobody. Well, 1. Okay. That makes 2 of us. Okay. All right. So, and everybody else, you're kind of in the middle. You know a little bit about it, but I am going to talk just very quickly about what the UDO is, why we have it, what it's designed to do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the UDO in Burlington. We've been working on this for several years. I'm going to talk about some of the amendments that we've made up to this point. Staff has amended the UDO 7 times since its adoption, which is pretty much on average. It's pretty typical. We'll talk about why we're doing these workshops, and then I'm going to just open it up and hopefully try to answer your questions, get your feedback, and I pledge to you as part of this effort and what the city's been doing since adoption. We want to hear from you. We want to take your comments back to the elected officials. And we do make changes to the ordinance on a regular basis. So this isn't a, set it and forget it kind of thing. We're always trying to make the ordinance better, and it's very helpful for us to hear from you guys how we can improve it. So who am I? I'm Chad. ProGrade is my firm. It's just me. I'm not a giant corporation. It's just me. I was born in North Carolina. I grew up here. I left for grad school, swore I'd never come home, and here I am. I've been back for 20 years. North Carolina, and I don't need to tell you guys, this is a great state. And it's gotten a lot better recently. It's a good place to be. I live in Durham. I founded CodeWrite in 2014. My sole purpose in life, other than listening to my wife, is to write codes and plans for local government communities. Okay, so that's what I do. Over the course of my career, I've drafted about 21 development codes, including 10 in North Carolina. And I've been working with staff in Burlington for 6 beautiful years, which is kind of amazing. That's a long, long time for a consulting firm to have a relationship with the community. And it's been very, very fruitful. Hopefully staff feels that way. I know I do. So that's me. Let's talk about the UDO for a second. So what is a UDO? First off, that stands for Unified Development Ordinance, okay? So it's the consolidated zoning, subdivision, and environmental regulations, okay? They're brought together in a single document, okay? And this document controls the use of land, and it sets down where land uses are permitted. Part of the UDO is the zoning map, okay? So that's the geographic representation of the UDO, all right? So not just what kinds of uses and where, but how. How can those uses operate, okay? How are the sites configured? What's the process that I follow to establish a new use, or add parking, or do something to my existing development site, or build on my vacant land, okay? The UDO covers all of those things. It also covers what happens if my neighbor lets his grass grow too tall, or other nuisance kinds of problems that are related to land use, right? So, and we can all relate to that. So, zoning and subdivision regulations in North Carolina, I'll back up and just tell you this. All local governments in North Carolina have the authority to regulate land use and zoning. It's given to us by the General Assembly here in North Carolina. And basically, these zoning, subdivision, environmental protection regulations are designed to do 5 things. Okay? There's a quiz later, so just kidding. 5 things. Protect the public health. Protect the public safety. Okay? Protect the public's welfare. Protect property values. Okay? And protect prosperity. Prosperity for residents, for landowners, business owners, okay? That's what development regulations are supposed to do. Sometimes it might not feel like that, particularly if you are an applicant. However, the intent behind the regulations is to protect health, safety, welfare, property values, and prosperity, okay? That's what it's supposed to do. Let's talk about Burlington's UDO. And to do that, we need to stretch back a little bit and talk about the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the city's future vision for itself. Okay, it's developed by you guys, by the people who live or own property in Burlington. Back in 2015, the town council adopted Destination Burlington. That is your comprehensive plan. Okay, and essentially, in addition to kind of guiding future land use, there's 6 key objectives. So I'm going to share these with you because they inform what the UDO is all about, okay? So the comprehensive plan, back in 2015, the residents of Burlington and the elected officials decided that we wanted a plan to do 6 things, okay? We want to create more housing options, a wider range of housing types, not just single-family detached residential, but a wider variety of houses, okay? We want to encourage a mix of uses, okay? So on a particular development site, you might have a residential use and a commercial use, or an industrial use and a commercial use. They share the same property, okay? That's done to minimize traffic and to create prosperity. We wanted to increase residential densities in core areas. Why would we do that? The city has made infrastructure investments, roads, water, sewer, services, etc. Those investments are concentrated or focused in the core areas of town, okay? Now, the best thing to do, the most efficient use of land, is to have higher densities in those core areas. It allows the city to recover some of the investment that was made on infrastructure. It also lowers service delivery costs for the city, okay? So it stands to reason that you want to have higher densities in the core area, and that's definitely what the comprehensive plan calls for, okay? Create flexible zoning tools for development. We, I think, have done that. Certainly staff's diligent effort for the past 6 years on your UDO should give you every reason to believe that we've integrated zoning flexibility, things like administrative adjustments, plan developments, menu-based standards, a variety of different things that we've incorporated to try to make it easier to develop land, easier to support property values, okay? Require open space, amenities, and greenways. This was a big deal when the city adopted the comprehensive plan. We don't have enough recreation land. We don't have enough greenways. It's too hard to get from one side of the city to another without a car, right? I can't bike, I can't walk, there's nowhere to walk, etc. The comprehensive plan was trying to address that, and it directs the city to improve recreational amenities and greenways, okay? So those are important parts of that. Complete streets and a connected street network. In other words, a street network that has sidewalks, on-street parking, bike lanes, has connected streets, part of a complete and integrated street system. Very, very important for functional urban areas to have a connected street system, okay? Finally, better integrate stormwater management. You just about have to be under a rock to not see where we are with climate, with weather, with all of the challenges that we're facing. And frankly, some of those concerns are growing, they're not shrinking. And having better stormwater management and dealing with our environment and the problems that it creates for us is going to become ever more important, okay? It was important back in 2015, it's even more important today. All right, so those are the reasons why. Those are the elements in the comprehensive plan, okay? Why does all of that matter? Here's why. The UDO is the primary tool that the city uses to implement the comprehensive plan. Those 6 things I just went over with you, that's our vision for the future in Burlington. How do we get there? The UDO. The UDO does that, all right? That's why it matters. So we started on the UDO back in 2016. We did a series of stakeholder interviews. We did an ideas forum with City Council. There was an assessment. We drafted the current zoning and subdivision regulations, and we finished in 2016, okay? It's been about 2.5 years working on this. And there were, gosh, I don't know, 50 people on staff over the course of preparation. This wasn't a document that I went home and worked on over the weekend in my living room. This is something that tens and tens of people worked on for years, okay? This is a pair of slides from the presentation that was given back on July 16th of 2019 when the UDO was adopted, okay? And the first slide shows the 6 goals for the UDO, and those should start to sound a little bit familiar to you. Making development easier to use, making the document easier to follow, raising the bar for development quality, that's things like connected street networks and open space, etc. Incorporating incentives and flexibility, making it easier to realize prosperity. Those were the goals for the UDO, and they flow directly from the comprehensive plan. Now the second slide is just a reminder to the elected officials, frankly, that the UDO is a living document. It can and will change, right? Remember, when the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2015, we were just coming out of the Great Recession, right? There was no housing crisis. No one had ever heard of COVID, right? There was no inflation. There was no supply chain issue. All of the challenges that we're facing today, or the majority of the challenges that we're facing today weren't with us when we adopted the comprehensive plan, when we adopted the UDO. They are with us now. And so the UDO has changed. And like I said before, it's changed 7 times. One more thing. Since we adopted the UDO, there's been 2 elections, 3 city managers, 3 planning directors, a pandemic, unprecedented federal economic stimulus, the housing crisis I mentioned before, many, many other challenges. So we're in a very different world now, okay? Different world, different people. The UDO has been modified to keep up with that, to try to focus on remaining relevant, remaining current, remaining helpful, okay? So some of the changes that we've made have been very, very simple ones, like the very first round of amendments was focused on setbacks, lot coverage, fixed typos. Some of the changes we made were rather large, okay? So round 3 changed just about every single page in the UDO. It was done to comply with changes to state law. But through it all, okay, through all 7 sets of revisions that we made, city staff has remained true to basically ensuring that the UDO is helpful, responsive, and creates prosperity, okay? So I can't tell you that enough, how important it is for the city, for the staff, to make sure that this document is helpful to you, okay? That it's precise, that it's clear, and that it maintains compliance with state and federal law, which we kind of have to do, so as a sidebar. So why are we doing these workshops? Well, we're doing these workshops because staff, and myself can't be, in y'all's offices every day. We can't work with you and experience the challenges that you're having in your working world and in your travels. And we very much need to have a deeper understanding about questions you have, challenges you're facing, things that you think we should be doing to improve the UDO so that it does work properly. And so that's why we're here. So that's today. That's my long-winded introduction to why we're here. I am going to open it up now and attempt to answer any questions that you have. And what I would suggest we do is, you don't need to raise your hand, just shoot out with a question or a comment. Staff will be taking notes. You're not seeing me take notes, but staff is on it. So obviously we're recording this so that we'll have this information for us. I will tell you that we are working on a round of revisions, amendment set number 8. And it's another biggie. We are working on that right now. We anticipate going to the planning board with that round of changes in May, so this month. Assumedly that'll go to council, June, July. And we would very much like to incorporate suggestions, comments, improvements, that you guys have for us to factor in. And so, with that, I'm going to just stop talking and start answering questions. Does anybody want to start? Otherwise, I might have to pick on you. Please.
Why do zoning maps, why don't they follow like center lines of roads or property lines? Why do you have some zonings going through properties?
That's a great question. So, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the zoning map sets down a series of districts. In Burlington, I think there's 12, 13 of them. The zoning district designation controls the range of allowable uses on that site. It also sets down the dimensional requirements, the setbacks and lot sizes and those things that you have to work with. So the question was, why are the zoning district boundaries on the zoning map so crazy? It's a good question. They change over time, okay? Sometimes new streets go in, sometimes streets are closed. Back in the day, depending upon who was on staff, they might have decided that they wanted to follow street right-of-ways. They might have decided they wanted to follow street center lines, but the streets change. Also, zoning is, that is a voluntary action of the person who owns that land. They can go to city council and request a change to their zoning district designation, which the city council has to consider. Now, they've got a variety of rules and things that they need to follow in, either granting, denying, or amending that request. But they're bound to hear that. And sometimes, some people like to split their property into 2 or more zoning district designations for whatever reason, because they want to develop it one particular way, because they want to sell some of it, or for some other personal reason that, we just don't know. So I don't know if that answered your question. It's very, very difficult over time in the complex world of a city, particularly the core, to simply say, well, we're going to use street edges as our zoning district boundaries because those streets change so often, or because somebody wants to split their property into multiple zoning district designations. Did that answer your question, or do you have more?
Pretty much, just wondering.
Okay. If I don't answer your question, tell me, and I'll just keep blah blah until I do. Anybody else?
Yes.
A woman there.
I have a question about, I represent low-income families and affordable housing. So has there been an insertion to the ordinances about setting a minimum set aside for developers to ensure that when they're building their $1 million home, that they put a percentage that's affordable to others? Because if I want to develop where the amenities are, 1, can't afford it, and 2, I get denied in my backyard. So this is one way around it. Developers have to put some percentage of their housing. Has that been included or being considered?
It's a great question. So the question is about affordable housing and a couple of concepts that are out there, particularly in more mature, wealthy communities. And some people call it inclusionary zoning. Some people call it mandatory set-aside. And the concept works like this. When a developer who's developing property over a certain size comes into town to request approval for that development, the development regulations require them to either set aside a portion of land strictly for affordable housing for people who make a certain amount of money, okay, that's based on federal numbers, or either set aside land or provide money, okay? Money for the city or another developer who is working with the city to provide that affordable housing, okay? So that's the concept. This is a concept that's in use in large cities across the country. And frankly, we're seeing much more mandatory inclusionary zoning, mandatory set-aside, since, 2015, 2017. We're seeing a lot more of that kind of activity. Does Burlington have a mandatory set-aside or inclusionary zoning component? No, it does not. If that's something that you think the city should explore, then I would encourage you to certainly tell us today, certainly tell the elected officials that that's something that is important. It's necessary to make the case for why that is important and why it's needed. I will say this. Burlington is absolutely positively committed to bringing newer, more dense, more affordable forms of residential development to the market in Burlington. They are part of the CDBG, the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program, which its sole purpose is to make sure that people have good, affordable housing. And I think the city takes that seriously. I can tell you from the UDO side of things, we are finding ways to make it easier to do duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, attached residential apartments. We have not gone so far as to mandate inclusionary zoning. Now, without giving you way more information than you ever wanted to know about North Carolina, I will tell you a couple of things. One, North Carolina is what's called a Dillon's Rule state. And what that means is that the General Assembly has much more control over the kinds of things that local governments can implement in their zoning regulations, okay? More so than a home rule state, okay? So Virginia is a Dillon's Rule state, like us. South Carolina is a home rule state. Okay, so they have more choice about what they can do. The General Assembly, this previous session, proposed a bill that said local governments may not require inclusionary zoning, may not require set aside of money. Now, that bill is still in play. It hasn't made its way to law yet. But that gives you a sense of the challenge that local governments are up against at the state level in terms of these kinds of provisions. Now, having said all that, the world, it is a changing. We are recognizing that we're in the throes of a housing crisis. I don't know how many units we're shy across the state, but I know it's more than 50,000. The General Assembly understands that and hopefully is working towards helping us find a solution for that. Maybe inclusionary zoning or set aside might be part of that solution, maybe not. But we don't have it in the UDO, and that if you think that that's something that's important, it's important for you to advocate with the staff and advocate with the elected officials, because they're obviously going to face some people who have a different perspective about the need for inclusionary zoning. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it did.
I'm sorry if I went a little bit long there. It's a very, very important issue, and local governments in the state have a variety of challenges that we're dealing with in addressing that. Who else?
Me. So what are the thinking goes into when you decide that HDR would have 7 units per acre or 4.85 for MDR? Why that? Why, how that come from?
Where in the heck did those numbers come from? Right.
Plus, since now the situation has changed when you guys started this UDO versus today. So one side I have my surveyor sitting right there, one side I have banker sitting right there. None of them are happy with those UDO the MDR number or HDR numbers. It doesn't make sometimes sense to develop the land or parcel. So I'm just wondering that how that number comes from or what can be done.
Sure, it's a great question. So the question was, let me back up and tell you this. So many of the zoning districts, so zoning districts generally, remember when I said the zoning ordinance controls what land uses can go where, and the zoning map is the geographic representation of where those uses can go, okay? It also controls the dimensional standards, things like density, the number of residential units you can have per acre, or the dimensional requirements, what are the setbacks, what are the lot area requirements, etc. All of that stuff is controlled by the zoning district. Okay. Now, zoning district provisions for residential development, those districts that allow uses for where people live, residential development, have what's called density maximums. There's a maximum number of residential dwelling units that can be accommodated on that land per set amount of land area. Typically it's an acre, but it doesn't have to be. Okay. One of the zoning districts in Burlington is called MDR, medium density residential. And it has a density figure of 4.85 dwelling units per acre. Okay, so if I've got an acre of land, I can have 4.85 units. Actually, I can have 5, because we allow it to round up. But okay, 5 units for that 4.85 acres. The question is, where in the heck did that number come from? You're not going to love the answer, but I'm going to give it to you anyway.
I told you I need eggs.
When we wrote the UDO, what we attempted to do was take the zoning district numbers that were in place before we started on our UDO work and use them as the basis for the new zoning district boundaries. Why did we do that? Because we didn't want to create nonconformities. We didn't want to create a situation where people who already owned land with buildings on it were suddenly thrown out of conformance and into problems with financing. Now, one could make the argument, you made the densities too low. They're not high enough. I'm not able to recover my investment, which my guess is that's probably the argument that you'd like to make. It's not so much that they're too dense, it's that they're not dense enough.
Yes.
Understood. And I can tell you that, as a matter of fact, Staff is aware of that, the elected officials are aware of it, and we are working to find ways to encourage other kinds of residential uses in MDR at higher densities. So that is something that is underway now. At the end of the day, this is a policy issue for your elected officials to decide. We have suggested, one, that you allow a wider variety of residential uses by right in MDR anyway. Remember back in the day, you couldn't even do this stuff in these districts. Now we're starting to get in the duplex and the triplex and the townhouse and that sort of thing. That's starting to become a thing. The densities, perhaps still too low to make development profitable.
Because density remains same. Even if I put townhomes,
That's
still
correct.
be 4.85.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And that's what my argument is, that it doesn't make sense to me as a developer.
Right. So the point. I want to speak back to you to make sure that I indicate that I understood what you said. That it's well and good for the zoning districts to accommodate these wider range of residential uses. But if you haven't raised the densities, then you haven't really done much for us.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And I can tell you that we are trying to find ways to increase densities. You may remember when I was talking about the comprehensive plan, we were talking about inside these quote-unquote core areas, these places already served by infrastructure, and how it makes economic sense for the city to have higher densities in those areas. So I think the quick answer is, yeah, we get it. I think we're working on it. Change is slow, particularly when it comes to density.
I got it.
Design is very, very important, and that's some challenges that we've got as well. But thanks for that question. Anybody else? Please.
I'll stand up so I'll at least be seen. Chad, we've met before, Eric Henry. Thank you to City of Burlington. I'm also probably the guy that you stick the sign in my yard for not mowing my grass. But I also want to thank the city too, because I guess I live in two worlds right now. My business is in the City of Burlington, but I live in Alamance County, a land of no land use planning at all.
None at all.
So we are definitely fighting head on to what's happening right now, because economic development is going to come. And for those who don't know me, how I got to where I am today is I've had a business in Alamance County for 43 years. I had a business that went through NAFTA and saw a business got destroyed. And we changed our focus to a business that looks at a triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And today we produce a t-shirt completely in North Carolina. But you made a very good point earlier. The world is changing. Climate change, pressures on bees, access to food, and just came out of COVID. We have to build more resilient and connected communities. And for those people that understand our business out towards the airport, and they think, this guy doesn't mow his grass. Back probably 30-some years ago, I went down to NC State and worked with them to develop a permaculture plan. I'm sure you know what that means. To develop a landscape that works not only for my business, but with nature. So what I'm asking the city is we have to develop landscaping options beyond just mowing the grass. Yes, we got to have plans. It's not about just letting the grass grow up. But why do we do what we do? Because what I said earlier, we want to address climate change. We want to build a place where it invites bee population, have beehives there. And then we need to start looking at landscape, not a monoculture thing that people go out and mow every year, but we need to promote vegetable gardens in people's front yards. Because we just got our ass kicked with COVID. And what's happened to us now is record inflation. We need to give people access to grow vegetables in the yard. So again, I'm looking for the city and working with you, is we need to promote those options. Again, if you want to have your monoculture, nobody's changing. But look at what we're doing as TS Designs as an option for the future. Also, TS Designs was one of the first places, I believe, in Alamance County that put a solar array in there. And therefore, in the city of Burlington, this way before your time here, they thought it was some type of satellite dish. They said, what is that big thing there? We're also the first place to put a biodiesel station. Boy, we had to go to Rye to get that one figured out because they heard the diesel, not the bio, and they were thinking all kinds of spills and stuff. So again, we want to work with the city. We are glad. When we built TS Designs, we were in the county. And so we came into, we need to talk about the chicken things too, and that's a city council thing too. I think from Asheville to Wilmington, correct me if I'm wrong, but Burlington is one of the few municipalities that doesn't allow chickens. I'm talking chickens, not roosters, but again, access to food. So again, those chickens had to move from my business at TS Designs to my farm and snow camp, because at one time it was $500 per chicken fine. I don't know if that's changed or not. I don't know if there's this change, but anyway, I will play by the rules. We were mowing our grass this week. I got our sign, so we're going to do it. So we will play by the rules in front. We will do that. But I encourage the city, I encourage the chat, there are options, because I work with a planner. We can change this plan to basically, if we have a certified permaculture plan, that can be a landscaping option. And there's people who do it. NC State is a great place to do it. So let's look beyond and look at the future, because you said right on that, the world is changing faster than ever had before. We've got to basically, we can't take 10 years to figure this out. We've got to change it today. So please, again, thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, thank you folks for sitting all what you do here. And please come out. TS Designs and those for the planning department knows very well. But for those who don't, come out and see what we're doing here. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you for that. So, for those of you who aren't super familiar with the whole development realm, you know, we have requirements in the code about landscaping. Okay, so if you're going to do almost any kind of development, except for a single-family home where we don't necessarily have some requirements, anything else we do. Got to have landscaping on your site: trees, shrubs, ground cover, etc. Those landscaping standards are drafted based on best practice from 10, 15, 20 years ago. They're not based on a need to have a highly sustainable food producing kind of a situation, the one that Eric's talking about. So I think he's encouraging us to recognize a broader range of allowable landscaping types, which, you know, is happening in progressive places. I used to work in the Keys before I came back to North Carolina. And in the Keys, we allowed fruit trees and garden vegetable plants to be credited towards landscaping requirements. A little bit different there in that, you know, they don't die like they do here, but that's the idea, is using food crops and food plants as allowable forms of landscaping where that makes some sense. So thanks for that, and I appreciate it.
So Chad, let me ask you a question. So when we have these recommendations like what he's talking about, when we have recommendations, is there a board of engineers that kind of meet behind the scenes with the city that says, okay, hold on, here's some viable options that we need to write in? You know, is there structural
That's a good
engineers?
question. Right.
You know, agricultural engineers and different people that kind of meet as separate from the city. I know you guys are engineers, but
Right. So the question is, hey, when somebody proposes one of these ideas, what happens? What do we do with that information? How does that make its way up the food chain and then back down to us to write something? So I'm going to take a stab at it, and Nolan, if I misstep or misspeak, you can correct me. But essentially, you know, we get information from folks like you, and we try to figure out. First off, we share it with the elected officials. We say, you know, and that's absolutely what we'll be doing today, is sharing the information we've got. Housing, zoning district lines, landscaping, whatever else we hear. We'll share that with them, and we'll get a reaction from them. Yeah, that sounds good. Go investigate. Come back and propose something to us. Or, that sounds good, but we're not ready to go there. Let's focus on something else, okay? And that's their prerogative. They're the elected officials. They're the ones who get to decide what we spend our time and money on, right? So, we'll take this up the chain, we'll ask them. They'll either tell us, yep, go figure something out, or nope, we don't want to do that now. That's when we work with staff, myself, and you said it yourself. Yes, there are tons of engineers, tons of very, very bright people on city staff who work with me and others to come up with proposals. Those proposals are then carried and vetted through the process. They have to get through staff. If you've ever submitted a development application in Burlington, you know what a challenge that could be. Staff is very detail-oriented. Those have to go through staff, and then we have to go through planning board, and then we have to go through the elected officials. So that's the process. But let me ask this question. Should we change that? Should we improve it? Is there a better way for us to deal with these kinds of suggestions? That was to you.
To make a change. But, you know, he makes some good points, and because I think we're all after the same thing as, you know, Greenways and, you know, landscape looking good. And I do think there's a hybrid there. I mean, we all are conscious of the environment. We all are conscious of money that the developers are having to put out. You got to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know if there's a better way to do it.
Okay. Well, we do follow a process. I don't know, Steph, if you want to share any of your insights on that, but, you know, we spend a fair amount of time researching and coming back to the elected officials with a variety of different options for them to consider. Hopefully, they'll pick one, or some of one and some of another one, and we put those together into a set of regulations or proposed changes that we bring forward.
But Chad, are you the go-to person that helps bring those best practices from other communities back to the city? Because we don't need to reinvent the wheel when Asheville or Wilmington or Raleigh is doing something X that we need to do. Why do we have to, I mean, are you the conduit that says, hey, here's something that somebody else is doing in another community and not start from scratch there? Do you help bring that information?
I do, but it's not just me. It's not a one-way street. As frequently as I might bring a change to them for consideration, they're bringing something to me based on some conversation they've had with someone just like yourself. And you know, I will tell you that I know of at least 2 instances in the recent past where city staff has gone out and done their own research on a particular issue. And you know, searched the Raleighs and the Wilmingtons of the state to find out what they're doing, and brought that to our discussion. So I know that they do that. That's a very important thing that they do, so that they're not influenced unduly by my perspective, to be honest with you, because you know, I mean, they got to live with what we're writing too. So I'd say it's a two-way street. We do try to work together, and honestly, I think my role is more of a, how are we going to make this work in day-to-day practice? And I think that they're the ones who are often bringing the innovation and bringing the new ideas that are used elsewhere, and we try to figure out how are we going to make this work within the context of Burlington, right? I'd say that's closer to how the relationship works than me coming in with some harebrained idea from out west, though I do that from time to time. But yeah, I think that's usually how it works.
And I forgot to mention, I was going to compliment the city on the work that they did at Willowbrook Park. I grew up in that community, so I remember what would happen. We would have 2 inches of rain, it would just rip right down the middle and be just mud fields. So a lot of planning, a lot of work. My mom still lives over there, but I mean, good job. But again, that's almost kind of an example of permaculture, because you've taken an environment that, you know, you could have just, you know, industrial, put a big old pipe down there and covered it all up and paved it. But no, you built this beautiful park that is great for walking, but then when we have those more and more frequent 3 and 4 and 5 inches of rain, it just doesn't blow that place apart. It manages. So it was, you know, that took a lot of planning and obviously a lot of money, but you created something beautiful down there. But again, a big part of that success is you're using nature. You just didn't put a bunch of walls and gutters and pipes. You basically changed the course of that stream, and I forgot the company that did the engineering, but all the landscaping was purposely the trees, the vegetables, got on my mind here, grasses that were utilized. I mean, you're using nature to address a water issue there, and you've done a fantastic job, and thoroughly enjoy that. So, hats off. Can be done.
Indeed it can, and I will say that the UDO includes a variety of incentives for folks who want to follow that kind of a development pattern, whether that's a low impact development approach or, you know, some kind of living landscape. You know, there's a set of sustainability incentives that attempt to incentivize those kinds of activities and that style of development. Now, whether or not we've got the prices calibrated and, you know, the things that we offer, if that's, you know, fits with the costs associated with it, you know, that's a work in progress. But certainly there's a concept of encouraging sustainable development, low impact development, you know, stuff that's less of a footprint on the ecological landscape.
Yeah, I'll just add to Chad's question there. For staff, it's an ongoing process ever since, you know, the number 1 2019. The staff maintains a list, plan staff does. So we may be in a pre-application conference with a developer, or maybe we're reviewing site plan, and we realize there's a pressure point there with side of how things get implemented in the field, you know, your glazing, for example, you know, the percentage of glazing you have required in your standards, hey, that actually impacts the height of the building, that impacts this percentage of cost. And so those kind of things, we just add them to our list, and then when we get to this phase, where we are now, we have meetings with staff, Chad comes in, as we prepare our next round of protection notes, and we vet those things on the list. In fact, Wednesday, we got our, another 5 or 6 hour meeting day that we're gonna have, we had one last week. We're just grinding through these things going, what makes sense? And right now, our big thing is, you know, how do we find a better balance to help the, improve conditions and development in the city. So, you know, there are definitely some things when we went through this process, the UDO increased development standards, and that's a good thing, right? But it also comes with some pressure on development. So we're trying to look at ways to pull back a few things to try to still have improved development quality at the same time, make it better for development. But that's kind of our process. It doesn't stop, and we're always 4 to 6 months for coming back to council with another round of amendments.
I will say this, and maybe you know this and maybe you don't. I mentioned before how committed the staff was to making sure that this document works. Do you know who that guy is? Somebody who let that guy in here. Nolan, who are you? What do you do with the city?
I'm assistant city manager. I'm over development services.
Okay, so the assistant city manager is in this meeting. Okay, the city is committed to making sure that this document is functioning. Believe me, and we work very hard to try to keep it current and useful, not too expensive, and workable. So those are very important things for us, and the city has made a serious commitment to doing it. Please.
Question. Y'all are talking about, landscaping and, keeping the yards clean and all that. But my question is this. I like what Eric, I think his name was Eric TS Designs, like the idea we should be able to do that. I grew up in Brooklyn, but I don't live in Brooklyn. Now I help out with a business. Anyway, I'm also a chaplain in the area in the state of North Carolina. What I'm running into is you get somebody has a sign in their yard and you have X amount of days to clean up your yard or else. Is there any education in there? Because you may have an elderly person that's 93 years old who's not able to do it, or you may have a disabled person who used to do that and that's what they enjoy doing is not able to do it. Is there any resources or anything educational for those people?
Okay, let me drill down just a little bit. So the question was, is there educational information? Are there resources that the city can bring to bear instead of just going straight to, or in addition to, its regular enforcement actions? If somebody has done something that's maybe a violation of the rules or what have you, what other options or what other things can be brought to bear? So I wanted to ask a follow-up to that. Is it landscaping? Or is it signs, or is it both, or is it like everything?
It's a combination, but one is, one was a yard issue, one was having stuff in the yard, like boxes and stuff that needs to be cleaned up.
Okay.
Was one of the scenarios from a couple months back.
Right.
So, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you're suggesting that the city...
There may be an education phase there. I used to work many, many moons ago for the city of Burlington. We used to do, I used to be an animal control officer. So we used to do an education, and then, hey, we'll give you a warning. And that may be the case if they're already doing that. So my question is that being done? And then you say, hey, we're going to put a sign in your yard, and then we'll find you every so many days. Some of these people can't afford that. They're on fixed incomes.
Okay.
So if we can, there's resources out there to help them, or,
Okay.
Chad, I can comment on that because I'm living firsthand right now. Because I got the sign, then I got the letter. I mean, the city's doing their job. But maybe what you could do is put in that letter. Lettter just saying you're in violation, you need to fix this. It's a very form letter. Maybe there's some group, United Way or something in the community that could go in that letter and says, if you need help, here are the places to call. Not just says you're in violation, do this extra time. So maybe you can address that because they are sending, there's a letter of communication.
Yeah.
And they are doing that. So maybe they can.
Instead of like, you have an educational page.
If
instead of-
you need help here, here's some places to
Yes,
call.
exactly.
Not just, you better get this done, so you can address that person's handicap and a financial, whatever reasons, and not burn back to the city, so, because you can't go out there and address those things, but maybe United Way could, or I don't know, but,
Great,
Just an
great
idea.
suggestion, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Anybody else?
So I have a couple. So
Yeah,
the
Wes.
first one that I have is signage in downtown.
Okay.
Has there been any, and so all of my questions are directly related to the MSD.
Okay, so that is the, what's the MSD?
It's the downtown district that functions more, it has a lot more flexibility, and the goal is density and vibrancy within the downtown district. And so hopefully the ordinances that are in place are to encourage that and support it.
Right, so downtown Burlington has a special district. I think it's 40-some blocks or so, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's,
With also an increased tax rate.
right, so they tax themselves at a higher rate for the purposes of taking that tax money and using it to improve streets or walkways or facades or what have you inside of that district boundary. Okay, so you're here to talk about that part of town. Okay.
Directly related to the
Okay.
MSD. So our downtown district. So the first, I guess, has there been any reconsideration of the signage requirements in downtown since the UDO was initially drafted?
Absolutely, we have changed the signage regulations at least 5 times.
Okay, I don't know if those are, can we see those real quick so people can see it?
Well, I can pull them up for you, yes. They are not necessarily set up to be district-based, they're organized by sign type, but I can absolutely pull them up and we can at least have them here. Do you have a particular kind of sign in mind?
We've run into a couple of issues. One is with, we opened the food hall recently. And one of the problems that we have had at the outset was we wanted each business to be able to have kind of signage. The food hall's a wide building. There's a lot of surface area, I guess, that's exposed based on how it is. And we had to reduce each business's ability to put their name out there. And that's caused a lot of frustration for them because the goal in our MSD, in our downtown area, I think, is to promote density and more businesses in one location. And therefore, if there's a way maybe in the MSD to increase the signage opportunity per business, even if they're all under one roof, or just maybe a different lens to look at it through, so that for that particular, location, we have 5 restaurants and a commissary kitchen. And so, certainly we don't want to become, neon signs all over the front of the building, right? That's not at all what we're looking to do, but it would be, we ended up doing one metal hanging sign, but it still is a little hard as far as opening and who's where, because even for the vinyl planes, we need to go through the sign ordinance, through this town, through the city. So just trying to find maybe more flexible options for increased density within buildings downtown that have more than one tenant.
Okay. So the suggestion is that we find ways to further facilitate multi-tenant uses in the downtown, the CBD district.
Right, and to promote their ability to have signage out there.
I mean, I can tell you that, and I mean, believe me when I tell you, that there's 2 things in this ordinance that we have changed and that we have tinkered with from the very beginning. The first of those is fences, and the second of those is signage. And we have worked on signage for years, and obviously we have more work to do. But I take it very seriously, and your point is well made. We have tried to find ways to address the multi-tenant situation. It is a challenge. You've got a series of tenants in one building, and how do you kind of balance that against, your neighbors who don't have multi-tenant spaces, and therefore, you know, they get this much signage, but you get more because you're multi-tenant. If I'm multi-tenant, how come I? So we gotta find that balance. But I appreciate what you're saying.
Well, the goal hopefully would be that more buildings turn over into multi-tenant, right? Or,
The goal is we get a vibrant downtown.
Right.
And whatever we need to do to encourage people to live and work in that area is how we win.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
and I guess that's a good point, right? Because if you have a 2,000 square foot building versus a 15,000 square foot building, that's a really big difference.
Right. Okay. So point one was the signs. Figure out a way to make it better for multi-tenant. Okay.
And kind of a dovetail on the signs is the mural, like the ability to, mural art in terms of having a logo incorporated into that. I know we had, and I think you guys are aware, the Mini Dingo really wanted to do a mural, and they had a very cool artist in town who painted things inside their space. And the dingo was going to be quite small, actually, and the majority of the mural had nothing to do with their business. It was just a really cool mural to have in the downtown community. And they were going to pay for it, they had it all planned out, but because the dingo was a part of the big picture, they were unable to paint the mural. And so if there's a way to maybe look at murals and signage differently so that, hey, look, you can paint a mural, but if you want to put your logo in it, it can't be bigger than X by X. But that doesn't eliminate the possibility, because basically what they were going to have to do is reduce the whole mural to basically their logo, because their logo was well inside the limitations of the sign. But then they were, no, well, that looks silly. Here we're just going to have a picture of the dingo, and we can't do the rest of the mural. The whole point was to create, you know, the art in downtown. And so,
Okay. That's good information. I am absolutely not going to burden this group with the complexities of federal law in terms of signage. It's changed recently and it's bewilderingly complicated, which has given rise to the issue that you're talking about, which is how do we have something that's a mural that has an advertising function but yet isn't a sign? And how do we handle that? Right now we handle it by saying you can't have anything that's commercial in nature in the mural, and then the mural can be where you want it as long as you maintain it and it's cool. The issue comes when it's time to put something in the mural that ties back to a commercial establishment, whether that's the use that paid for it or the building where it's located or whatever. And you know, that's definitely something that we can look at and talk about. How do we facilitate murals, because murals help create a vibrant downtown, but do it in ways that don't create these opportunities for, you know, gigantic signs that all of the people who don't have murals are going to say, well, Chad got to put this giant mural up and now he's got this huge sign and I didn't get that. And, you know, so how do we navigate that? But that's a good point. Okay.
yeah, we can't come out and paint a hot pink Burlington Food Hall logo the size.
No, you can't.
Yeah, that's fine. But, you know, that we could create something beautiful, and then if they want to put a dingo in the corner, because that was their proposal, right? I think their dingo was going to be just down in the bottom right-hand corner, and then all the rest of the mural was just art.
Right, right.
And so, you know, or if there's a way to create two separate permit options, or I don't know, where, you know, hey, that's fine, if there's any business relationship, it has to be this big, but if you're going to do a mural, that's separate, or I don't know.
It's a challenge. All I can tell you is this, and I swear to God I'm not going to talk about it because it's way too complicated. The Supreme Court says if the staff has to look at the sign to figure out how to regulate it, then that sign regulation is unconstitutional. Okay? So you can go home and figure on that
Can't even
one.
process that.
Let's stir that one up.
Yeah. Okay, and then, so my last question, I guess, as far as it pertains to MSD, is green space requirements for residential development specifically. And that directly ties back to affordable housing, and, you know, meeting the needs of the community. And just, that's really a question back to the city, I think, when it comes to green space requirements, especially if we're starting to look at downtown Burlington in hopes that maybe we could see some urban infill there with rooftops and residences. Just how, right now there's a green space requirement in the UDO, right?
Right. So we have these rules in the UDO, and I'll just interject this and let you keep going. the Unified Development Ordinance says if you've got residential kinds of development in the city over a certain number of units, then you need to provide recreation resources for those residents, okay, on your site, all right? Whether that's, you know, a greenway trail, or it's a playground, or it's a basketball court, whatever. Now, obviously, none of that makes sense in downtown, but there are rules in the UDO for residential development and mixed-use development in the downtown to provide those kinds of open space resources. But they take the form of outdoor gathering space, plazas, roof gardens, atriums, those sorts of things. Urban, they're still open space, right? We still credit them as open space. But that stuff costs money.
Yep. And so, you know, of course, I'm a huge fan of open space within the downtown. You know, we have the patio between the Blend and the Dingo that I was telling Chad and Nolan, you probably remember this. My kids and I literally laid that patio like, because we couldn't get financing to do it, right? So, you know, creating pocket parks and downtown gathering spaces within the community is incredibly important to the community's vitality and growth. However, if we're looking at a building and providing rooftops and making sure they're affordable, when we start looking at creating those structures, it's very expensive to do urban infill anyway. And then once you add a rooftop terrace, or you add these gathering spaces, because maybe if we look at our parking lots in downtown, they're very small footprints. Mm-hmm. And so to add a recreational component is far more expensive than just putting in a basketball court, right? And then that money has to come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And if the money is part of the project cost, then the only option is to increase rents. And if we're increasing rents, we're no longer as affordable as we were hoping to be, and we can't meet our community's kind of median income needs in terms of being able to find lovely places to live within the community that are walkable and bikeable. So I guess I would propose that it's really a question back to the city, I think, and elected officials, but just the awareness of, hey, great, we've got this green space requirement in here, but now the only way to make the project work is to make the apartments cost more money, or the urban infills cost more money. And is that is that what we want to do, or is there another offset, or how could we potentially look at it?
Right. Okay. That's definitely something that we can explore. Some communities, have a fee in lieu. Now that may not work here because obviously it's a question of money.
That's still increasing the project cost, right?
But you could couple that with a grant program or some other kind of financing arrangement, or credit public property that's recreation based within a certain area, or find some other way to think outside of the box. Mm-hmm. In terms of helping people meet those recreational needs, having a downtown that has space for people to gather, but that doesn't interfere with our goal to revitalize and infill downtown. So it's a good point. Thank you. Please.
We would love to hear about the potential for implementation of the social district downtown. And then kind of going off that, have y'all in the city done anything to, establish that?
So when you say social district, tell me a little bit more about what that means to you.
Right. Well, so I'm sure you're familiar with the bill that North Carolina implemented.
I am.
Business back downtown.
I'm familiar, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So essentially, the social district would be establishing an area where residents could buy, say, beer from one restaurant and walk from there down the street, socialize, at a park or at a concert, go to another restaurant, get another beer. It's basically just a social area within downtown where you can have alcohol on the streets for a particular event, or just on Saturdays or something like that.
Okay. So this legislative session, and so remember, I'll just back up for a second. So remember, we got this thing called the General Assembly. It's our representatives and senators for all of the local governments, across the state. They're elected by North Carolina residents. And a lot of the legislation that local governments respond to, react to, implement, comes from the General Assembly. okay? And the General Assembly has a pending bill this session. It was proposed last year. I don't know that it's made any progress from, I think it may cross over, but I don't know if it's, I know it's not been decided yet. I think it's still in process, but the bill seeks to do this. It seeks to create or allow local governments to designate geographic areas, typically within their downtown, though it doesn't have to be, it could be anywhere, where patrons can go from, place to place, from bar to bar, restaurant to restaurant, proprietor to proprietor, on city streets, in parks, with alcohol, and food, and other things. But it's called a social district, and it's intended to create a more festival kind of an atmosphere where you don't have what you often see in sort of on-street dining places. I don't know if you spend a lot of time in bigger cities, but like one that I'll pick on is Miami Beach, okay? Lincoln Drive in Miami Beach is basically a pedestrian mall, and it's just a series of restaurants and bars, okay, that line this part of Miami Beach. Even though it's nothing but bars and restaurants, everywhere you go there, you have to stay inside the little usher real things they have at the movie theaters. You have to stay within your little pins, right? And you can't take alcohol out onto the sidewalk, okay? Because it's not a social district like what's being contemplated here. So this bill was proposed for North Carolina communities, and the question is, what is Burlington doing about this? And I'm going to look at staff about that. I can tell you that the bill is out there. Until the General Assembly approves the bill, I don't think that the city has the authority to operate something like this, because there's a series of ABC laws. I don't know, maybe it has.
I think it did
There's
pass.
Greensboro.
Yeah.
Greensboro's got it.
Salisbury's got it, Kannapolis has it. They're
So-
like- Yeah. it's-
What about it?
One thing to understand about legislation in a Dillon's rule state is it's not home rule, it's Dillon's rule. In other words, you get the authority that the General Assembly gives you, okay? So I don't know if this bill has been authored for everyone or just for Greensboro or Salisbury or whomever.
It's everyone.
Okay, well, there you go. So at that point, I think that's a policy matter. Staff, do you, I mean,
Can I just chime in real quick? I know, and this gets back to what I was talking about, the MSD, the Municipal Service District, which is a 16-block area downtown, pays an extra tax to help generate programs and services for that area. And that area has a nonprofit board, it's called Burlington Downtown Corporation, that kind of oversees those efforts, and the city supports that. And our economic development department, through Peter Bishop, who's our economic development director, he has staff to help support those efforts. I know that they're talking about this. I don't know exactly where they are on it. If you like, I can connect you with Peter. Be glad to do that. He can get with me afterwards, and he gives more information on where they are talking. They are talking about it.
So from a policy standpoint, it sounds like there's something that the city's looking into, which frankly would probably be helpful for downtown. Thanks for that. Thanks for telling me, because I wasn't sure. I hadn't checked on that bill for a while. I didn't know if it was still moving or if it was done. I'm going to go home after this and get my little forms out and nerd out and see if that actually is the case, because I really don't know, so I'll check into it. Other questions?
No, but it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yes, the question is, I just heard you saying that the city would allow a city lot to put this single lot, you can do duplex or triplex or something like that. Is that true? Is that what I hear from you earlier?
So the best place to, what you should look for is go to the Unified Development Ordinance and go to Chapter 4, where the use table is located. I'll show you what it looks like.
Okay.
Forgive my mousing, I'm mousing on top of this tablecloth. This is the principal use table that's inside the Unified Development Ordinance, and what it does is list all of the zoning districts that are in the city across the top, and then all of the allowable forms of use down the side. And wherever there is a letter inside of the cell matrix, that particular use type is either permitted by right or permitted by special use or permitted through a plan development or conditional zoning. So that will tell you exactly precisely what use and what districts are permitted.
Got it. Okay.
Okay?
Now, yes, I understood that part. The question again is, how do you treat, if it is an ETJ area, an annex back to Burlington, say for example, but so whose authority is that? Would that follow this rule? Or?
Yes. Anything that's in the city of Burlington extraterritorial jurisdiction, it's ETJ, is also subject to this.
Okay.
Now let's just say, just for the sake of argument, that you're a piece of property, you're not in the ETJ, right? That means you're in Alamance County or Guilford County, because the city has actually pushed its way into Guilford County as well. If you are not in the ETJ, then those rules do not apply to you. If you are annexed, if you come into the corporate limits, then those rules apply. Okay?
So, one more question. So, say for an example, MDR, 4.85 per acre, which is exactly 1 acre. But you need to develop something so that 9,000 square foot per lot would make it 4.85 times 9,000, make it 1 acre. So where that development expense or area comes to say when I assess to the road to those 4.85 units or whatever else, that considered in that 9,000 square foot, or 9,000 is exclusively 9,000. So now it becomes more than 1 acre, actually, what happens?
Well, so we do allow densities to round up.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say you're a little bit shy of an acre, or you're a little bit more than an acre, and you want to have, instead of 4.85 of a dwelling unit, you'd like to have a full dwelling unit, you can go to 5. So
let's take an example of 10 acres.
Okay.
So make it easy.
Okay.
So now it's 48 units or 49 units. Right, 49 units times 9,000, then you become almost 10 acres.
That's right.
But now you have to have accessibility to all the lots and all kind of things. So roads and other things, utility easement and all those things. So where does that come from?
So what happens when some of my land area is occupied by required open space or streets or landscaping or what have you, right? That's your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, if you're doing single-family detached residential development, those lots need to be 9,000 square feet in size. Okay, so you don't get to have units on those lots if you can't meet the lot sizes. If you're doing something else, like a single-family attached or an apartment or something like that, then as long as you've got the minimum amount of lot area per unit that's required for that, which is 1,600 square feet, then you don't have as much trouble meeting those minimum lot area per unit requirements. But those two things work together. They check and balance each other. And I will tell you this, that there has caused, that we've had great consternation among the staff for this issue for years now, as we've had staff members come and go, a lot of confusion, a lot of hand-wringing, and we're trying to get to the point where everybody agrees, this is what the rules mean and this is what they don't mean. I'm hopeful, Nolan mentioned earlier that we're meeting on Wednesday. The hope is that we're going to get to the bottom of this. Right now, those two things work together. They're both upper limits, right? In other words, you can develop up to 4.85 units an acre, or you can have lot sizes of 9,000 square feet. But if something conspires to prevent you from having that 9,000 square feet, then you can't put a residential unit on it, even though you might be able to take care of the density. You might be able to avail yourself of that density. If you can't meet the lot area, you don't get both. Okay, it doesn't work like that. So that's where we are today. We may not be there in the future, but that's where we are today.
Okay. So does that mean that you can give us some kind of, like say Eric wants if 10 acres, out of 10 acres, say 2 acres or 3 acres can be dedicated to green area, and still have that 10 acres, like 4.85 or whatever,
Yes.
48 units.
Yes, you have a couple of options open to you. The first is a plan development option, where you can come in and say, I understand MDR allows this much density and this for these kinds of minimum lot sizes. That's great. I want to do something else. Okay? And I want to provide more open space than the city otherwise requires, but I want the yield on my property.
Right.
Okay? What do? Well, you file for an application for plan development. You master plan the development, and then that's carried through a rezoning process. All right? And conceivably, what you're proposing, as long as you can demonstrate that the development that results from your plan is of equal or greater quality than what would otherwise result from a strict application of the standards, then you may go forward and do your development. So that's one option. Another option, depending upon your zoning district designation, is a conservation subdivision. That's something that's in there. You may be able to take advantage of it, you may not. It's kind of limited in terms of where it can be. Another option is a sustainability incentive. You can avail yourself of, you can include sustainable development features inside your development and raise your yield, raise your density. Okay? So there's at least 3 options for you. It's a good question. And who knows, I mean, as we continue to work, we may find even more options. One thing's for sure, we're going to get clear about this density and lot area business because it shouldn't be so confusing. So
I'm trying to read the mind with everybody's questions. We want environmentally sustainable.
Yeah.
We want to be affordable. And we want to be still able to be profitable.
Right.
So that's why I'm trying to understand this and how it can
Absolutely.
go through all these.
And it's a tough series of questions to answer. But I will say this, and I believe it's true, and I think staff will agree with me. If there is no profit, there is no development.
No, there is no doubt. Absolutely, right.
And so, I think that.
The profit drives everything. You are right in that sense.
Well, I mean, if you're not going to make money, then you're not going to do it.
Right, but we at the same time we want affordability and sustainability.
Absolutely.
There is no question on that too. So yes, good conversation.
But that's where we need the city to come back in and take care of the other piece, people and planet.
Right.
Because if you drive solely for profit, that's why we have a quarry in southern Alamance County right now, because they came to Alamance County because we had no use planning and low taxes. We got a quarry out of it.
No protection.
Because, and again, I told our people that we had this public hearing, they were all up in arms. I said, it's too late now. You can't change rules after the fact. What you got to do, you have a choice of either determining how your community's developed, or you have your community developed for you. And right now we're having developed for us because, it's very frustrating. Again, compliments to the city and what you're doing because, again, you're trying to help plan a future. Right. Instead of just let it happen. Right. And we see what happens there.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't always work.
No, not when you have a lot of pressure for development because if they're making a buck, and I don't have a problem making a buck. Sure. But don't make a buck at the cost of everybody else. And that's what's happening.
I understand that.
Okay. We have about another minute or so. Staff, is there? Please, Conrad.
Yeah, so just quick question for you, hearing everyone's comments. This workshop's title, Are We Getting It Right? Are we getting it right, Chad?
Are we getting it right? What we're doing is getting it right. Maybe we didn't get it right back in 2019, or maybe we got it right for 2019, but that has nothing to do with how the world is in 2022. We've undergone a lot of changes in staff, a lot of changes in the economy, a lot of changes in technology. I think we're getting it right. One thing's for sure, we're listening. We're having sessions with people. We're asking people to share their comments. And if you're doing that, then you're doing something right. Now, follow through, right? Follow through is the deal. We've been working on a set of changes to the UDO. It's our 8th. This round will be coming back, going to planning board in May. Some of the things that have come up today are probably more complicated, larger bites at the apple, like a social district. That's something that's going to take a little bit of time. Or, you know, an inclusionary zoning piece, that's going to take a little bit more time. I don't think that you can realistically expect to see those in May, but we've gotten the information. We're going to keep working and having these sessions and improving the UDO. And I mean, please stay involved. Please keep your eyes on what we're doing. Please tell your friends and neighbors and your colleagues, you know, that staff and myself, we're here to listen, and we really are committed to making it work for you. It's not just about what works for, you know, the bureaucrats or the lenders or the donors. It's for you guys. And with that, Jamie, do you want to close us out?
Thanks so much for your time, your great questions, and feedback. Like I said, staff is always here to listen to your concerns and research ways that we can improve things, come up with other ideas, at least have conversations in terms of what's working and not. So thanks to Chad, and thanks to the folks here at Bowtree, and I've got cards in case anybody
there's one more thing I wanted to show.
has questions for us.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks
There's
very much.
also a lot of boxes left over, so if you know anybody who is hungry, or you want something for dinner, or your kids, friends, family members, take one with you. We're happy to give it to you, otherwise it's going to come back with us, so feel free.
Thanks for reminding me. So we've been doing a lot of these work sessions. Okay, y'all are not our first. We've had a few. There'll be many more. This is a screen capture of the city's webpage. Okay, on there is online learning. Just Google it, Burlington Online Learning. You'll have access to today's presentation, the presentations we've given recently, the presentations we'll be giving in the coming days and weeks. So www.burlingtonnc.gov. 2386 online learning. And one more thing to share. This is everybody's contact information. Jamie Lawson is the planning director. Conrad at the camera there is planning manager. And Andrew Shore does the SmartGov, which is the development application software. If you filed an application in Burlington, you know it's digital. Andrew handles that.
I'm just going to give a quick plug too for our Historic District Standards Update project. So for those of you who don't know, the City of Burlington has two local historic districts. One is just outside of the downtown, West Davis, West Front Street area. And then the second local historic district is up in Glencoe Mill area. And then we have several landmark sites. So we have rules and regulations and standards separate and apart from our ordinance that affect those areas, and we're in the process of updating the standards for those districts. And so tomorrow night, incorporated with our Historic Preservation District, Historic Commission, we have a public meeting on our second public meeting on our standards update. So feel free, if anybody's interested in the District Standards Update project, it's an open meeting at 7 o'clock with the Historic Preservation Commission. It'll be after that. So I just want to throw it out there. Thanks so much for coming.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for arranging.